Fine. So 28th July today onwards, new batches starting in academy for SSC. So these are the top people in that and the best educators. So Phoenix batch is there, Brahmastra batch is there for all government exam because common eligibility test is announced for bank, SSC and railway. So next year onwards the exams will be like that, and the Safalta batch is there. So strong lineup of batches and very good teachers, constable exams and SSC multitasking, stenographer, foundation batch like that. So you can ask doubt, even as words you can ask or as sound you can ask, no issue with that. Price hike is there from today onwards, so whoever wants to enroll it, so got enroll in that. Fine. So there is a scholarship test also every Sunday 12 p.m. So if you are getting succeeded in it, definitely you will get some. Done. Hyperinflation. Hyperinflation. Hyperinflation in the sense situation where the prices rise in an alarmingly high rate. So it's dangerous for that economy. Deficit inflation, that is happening due to deficit financing. Whenever the government is balancing that deficit situation, that may lead to deficit inflation. Credit inflation, whenever the banks give excess credit loans to the market, more money is there in the market, so more demand. Credit inflation. Scarcity inflation, so scarcity is created for the products, that's why the price is increasing because the demand remain the same. Only the supply got congested. How the supply got congested? Due to unscrupulous traders or black marketers. So hyper, deficit, credit, scarcity. Next one is profit inflation. When the entrepreneurs are interested in boosting their profit margins, prices rises. That's normal thinking only, no? Suppose a biscuit packet that is being sold for 20 rupees now. So tomorrow, the entrepreneur thinks that 20 rupees is not sufficient. I am just getting 2 rupees only out of that. So he may increase that price from 20 to 25 rupees. So what happened? 25 rupee increased, so that 5 rupee extra is for his profit. So his profit margin is increased by him. So automatically the price increased. So when the entrepreneur, when the producer are making more profit, so the price rise can happen. Demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation. Inflation which arises due to various factors like a rising income, exploding population, leads to aggregate demand and exceed aggregate supply, and it tends to rise prices of goods and the services. This is known as demand pull or excess demand inflation. Understood? Demand pull or excess demand inflation means understood. So demand pull inflation. When the demand is increased, it pull the price level. That's what is pull inflation. So when this demand may increase, either the money within the people's hand is more. How the money is more? Because they have employment, they have more money. When they have more money, they demand more. Second one is the users are more. Suppose you take a telecom sector. Today they have 10 subscribers. Tomorrow they may have 100. That means when the population, when the subscribers more, when the users more, the demand is almost increased. Since the demand is increased, inflation also increased. Are you getting that? So the inflation, demand pull inflation, when the exploding population happens, population number increases, that also leads to demand pull inflation. Fine. So goods and services, more demanding people, so more inflation. Then cost push inflation. When price rise due to growing cost of production of goods and services, it is known as cost push or supply side inflation. Demand side inflation we have seen. This is supply side inflation. For example, if wages of workers are raised, then the unit cost of production also increases. As a result, the price of the end product attend to or end service being produced, supplied also increased. What does it mean? Same concept only. So 20 rupee biscuit. So earlier the labor who's working under this may contribute 5 rupees work. Now he demands no, I need 7 rupees. So 2 rupee increase has happened in the case of labor. The same 2 rupee increase in the price of this biscuit also will be reflected. So 20 become 22. So what does it mean? So supply side, if any changes happen, raw material cost is increased, labor cost is increased, electricity cost is increased, rent is increased, transportation cost is increased, definitely it will lead to inflation, price rise of the final product. Clear? Next one, money supply. The Reserve Bank of India is the central bank of our country. It manages the money system of our country. It has classified the money supply of our country into 4 components. Are you getting this? So RBI is the central bank of our country. It manages the monetary system of our country. It has classified the money into different components. So M1, M2, M3, M4. This is from basic NCERT also. You could see this reference. The same in most of the institutes. Not publishing also you could see this. Okay. M1. M1 is the currency with the public. M1 is the currency with the public. It includes coins also, currency notes also, plus demand deposit of the public also. Savings bank, we put money, we keep at a savings there. So that a demand deposit, that is known as demand deposit. So DD, demand deposit of the public, then currency notes and the coins with us. These all considered as M1. M1 is also known as a narrow money. So M1, M2, M3, M4. Which one is the narrow money? M1. So which one is the narrow money? The currency with the public is known as narrow money. Narrow money includes whatever with the people, the coins and currency we have, and the demand deposit. Why demand deposit? Because if I put ATM card in the machine, definitely I will get the currency back. But at the same time, term deposit, I won't get that money out like that. M1. M2. M1 plus post office savings deposit. Post office savings deposit are something that is of nature a little bit like a time deposit. Post office saving deposit, not we won't able to access it every time. Fine, it has a little bit process. So M2 means M1 for currency with the public plus post office savings deposit. Then M3. M3 is M1 plus time deposit of the public with the banks. So time deposit or the term deposit, like FDs and all you invest in the banks, that is what is time deposit. So M3 is M1 plus time deposit. M1 is demand deposit plus currency. M2 is this M1 plus post office savings. M3 is this M1 means currency DD plus time deposit. M4 is M3 plus total post office deposit. So whatever it comes in M1, M2, M3, that is reflected in M4. Next is fiat money. Many exams actually in our SSC also fiat money related definition, from the basic definition question could be asked. Fiat money. Currency notes in circulation are normally referred to as fiat money. For example, our 100 rupee currency you can take. So the currency notes that is in circulation normally referred to as fiat money. For example, 1 rupee note issued by the government of India is a fiat money. The note issued by RBI are usually referred to as bank notes. They are nature of promissory notes. So what is fiat money? Fiat money is something that does not have a value of its own. 100 rupee notes you take. Is there any value of its own? No. It is just a paper. You can also print it, but you will be jailed. But you can also print it. It's just a note. It's just a piece of paper. But it is a promissory note. It is a promissory note, and the means what it is. It means that the government is promising something. RBI is promising something. What they are promising? If you are exchanging this 500 written piece of paper with someone, they are obliged to give you back something of nature that's value is equal to 500. So it's a promise by the central government. So fiat money is something that does not have its own value, but it could be used as a money for exchange purpose. Okay. So read this, take a 5 minutes break. Direct taxes. These taxes are levied directly to the persons. These contributed major chunk in the total tax collected in India. So directly that person needs to pay the taxes. For example, the wealth tax or the income tax. So those are directly paid by us, or the stamp duty, that is also directly paid by us to the government. This is a type of tax levied on the individual whose income falls under taxable category. So directly that individual needs to pay that. So who all are categorized under the income tax? That may changes from year to year. Whenever the government is announcing the budget, they may make it clear below which particular income we want to tax it. Like that, government will make it clear. Then corporate income tax, that is also direct. Corporates are directly paying to the government. For example, you can take Reliance, you can take Infosys. These are all corporate houses. Year end depends upon the profit they earn. They do pay their taxes to the government, that is known as corporate tax. Securities transaction tax, that is happening in the way of securities and the shares. So in 2004 only it is introduced. It is levied on the sale and the purchase of equities. So many times the company's value are measured in the shares holding. So that is known as actually the equity. So when the equity that is exchanged between one shareholder to another shareholder, he will make a profit. So that profit, okay, that profit is, from that profit a tax is deducted, that is known as securities transaction tax or share transaction tax. Banking cash transaction tax. A banking transaction tax is tax levied on debit or credit entries on the bank accounts. It can automatically collected by the central counterparty clearing the settlement process. So if there also a particular above particular level of amount, bank also government also tax. Capital gains tax. Capital gain tax, as the name suggests, it is a tax on gain in capital. If you sell property, shares, bond, precious metals, you earn profit on it. Then you are supposed to pay the capital gains tax. For example, you may have a 1 acre property in your area. You bought it for 10 lakhs rupees. So tomorrow the price increased. You are selling that for 20 lakhs rupees. So 10 lakhs rupees the profit you earned. So for that 10 lakhs rupees you may need to pay a tax amount. Maybe around 2.5 lakhs you may need to pay to the government. So that is known as capital gain tax. Property tax, gift tax, house tax, professional tax, etc. could be categorized under this. Indirect taxes. So direct taxes we have seen: income tax, corporate tax, wealth tax, security tax. Those are directly paid by the that particular person. Suppose by the income I am benefited, I am paying the tax. By the wealth I am benefited, I am paying the tax. By the corporate activities, my company is making profit, so I am paying that. Indirect taxes are such that the tax burden is carried to the next level. Okay, tax burden is carried to the next level. You take the example of again the biscuit. So biscuit, suppose 20 rupees is the biscuit price. So on that 2 rupee might be the tax. So biscuit produced by a company called Britannia. Do you think that Britannia will pay the tax? No. Britannia, what they will do? Britannia will do, they add this 22 rupees to here as tax. And if you want to buy this 20 rupee biscuit, you may need to pay 20 plus tax 2. So the tax 2 rupees is imposed on the producer, but he successfully transferred that tax on the customer. So that is known as indirect taxes. You go to supermarket to buy goods or to restaurants to have a mouthful. There at the time of billing, you often see yourself robbed by some amount that what you enjoyed of. These extra amounts are indirect taxes which are collected by the intermediaries, and when government tax the income of the intermediaries, this extra amount goes in the government's kitty. Hence the name suggests are levied indirectly on the common people. So indirectly from the common people, the end users, this money is being charged, tax is being charged. So all these taxes are indirect taxes. So what are they? Sales tax, value added tax, VAT, customs duty, service tax. We will see one by one. VAT, value added tax. When we pay an extra amount of price for the goods and the services we consume or buy, that extra amount of money is called VAT. This tax is about to be replaced by GST. Actually, it's replaced by GST. We know that. So anyway, in many countries, VAT is there. If you are thinking about Dubai also VAT is there. So when we pay an extra amount of price for the goods and the services we consume to buy, that extra amount, that value for the value addition, how much is taxed? That is known as value added tax. Again, that is also paid by whom? The customers, the consumers. Customs duty. Customs duty. Customs duty is a type of indirect tax levied on goods imported into India as well as goods exported from India. So when you are importing, when you are exporting, a tax is imposed, that is known as customs. So that is imposed by whom? It is imposed by the government of India. Fine. In India, the basic law for the levy and the collection of customs duty 1962, it provides for the levy and the collection of duty on import and export. At the end, whoever importing on them, this comes. For example, you take the example of a Lamborghini car. You are importing that from abroad. So a customs duty is imposed on that. So 1 lakh might be the price of the car. 30,000 rupee might be the customs duty. In many cases, 100% is the customs duty. So the price of the goods at the end it become 1,30,000. Right? Service tax. Service tax is the tax imposed by the government of India on services provided in India. The service provider collects the tax and pays the same to the government. It is charged on all services except the services in the negative list of services. For example, the medical services are fine. So service tax, for example, whenever you visit any tourist places or you stay in hotels, so these all are the services provided by them. Banking activity, services provided. All these activity there is a tax. So that tax is charged on the actually the service provider. What he will do? He will slowly impose that tax to you. So indirectly given that tax on you. At the end you are paying the tax. That tax is given by the intermediary to the government. Fine. So you have to pay more money in that perspective. Service tax. Sales tax. Sales tax charged on the sales of movable goods. Customs duty or octroi on goods. Octroi is a tax applicable on the goods entering from one state to another for consumption or the sale. Okay. In simple terms, it is called entry tax. So octroi tax, many times in the exams we do see this word octroi tax. So understand its meaning. Understand its meaning. Between the states, whenever it is entering, that is known as octroi tax. Now, with the GST introduction, we know there is no octroi tax. Customs duty, excise duty. Indirect tax charged on the goods imported into India. Excise duty. Excise duty is a type of tax charged on goods produced within the country. Another name is tax is CENVAT, Central Value Added Tax. So the price produced in India is there now. On that a duty is there, that is known as excise duty. Government budget and the economy. So what is a budget? Two broad divisions of the budget. Two budget received. Okay, just to go through it once. Okay, so government budget and the economy. What is a budget? Annual statement of the estimated receipt, estimated expenditure of the government. So it is some kind of anticipation, you can say, right? Anticipated amount. So anticipated income, anticipated expenditure, that is known as the budget. Name the two broad divisions of the budget. Revenue is there, capital is there. Revenue is there, capital. Revenue is like there is no permanent setup is being happened. It's for the sake of that time it's happening. That is revenue budget. Capital budget is something you are investing on a company. You are investing on the infrastructure. So continuously that will give you back something in return. That is capital budget associated. What are the two budget receipts? Revenue receipts, capital receipt, expenditure, revenue expenditure, capital expenditure. Name the two types of revenue receipt. Tax revenue is there, non-tax revenue is there. So revenue receipt, okay. Tax revenue is there, non-tax revenue is there. Two types of taxes: direct taxes, indirect taxes. The direct income, interest tax, wealth tax, indirect customs duties, excise duty, sales tax, VAT, etc. What are the main items of the capital receipts? The market loans or borrowing by the government, loans received from the foreign governments and the international financial institutions like World Bank, Asia Development Bank, ADB, etc. So these are the capital receipts or capital income. Market loans, loan raised by the government from the public by selling its shares or government security selling. Borrowing by the government. The government may borrow from the banks. Loans received from foreign governments. So sometimes UK may be giving millions of dollars to India. International financial institutions might be giving loans to India. Sometimes grant, sometimes loan. These all are capital receipt. Give two example of developmental expenditure. Plan expenditure of railway and the post. Means planned you are expending on railway and the post, those are development expenditure. Give two examples of non-development expenditures. Expenditure on the defense, interest payment. For example, interest payment, that is non-development in the nature. What do you mean by development expenditure, non-development? Development expenditure means you are developing the infrastructure, you are developing something and it is having a long standing. The communication systems in our country, railway networks in our country, the bridges, the toll gates, okay. So like that many are development. Non-developmental one expenditure on the defense. Suppose we are buying 10 missiles, okay, 100 lakhs guns we are buying. So what is the development happened? Nothing at all. You bought a tool, that's it. Interest payment. Many times you may take loans from the foreign government. So when you are taking loan, definitely you need to pay back interest. So by paying the interest, that money is gone. There is no value addition, value production is happening. So interest payment is categorized as non-productive. Define surplus budget. Surplus budget is one where the estimated revenue are greater than the estimated expenditure. Estimated revenue are greater than the estimated expenditure, that is known as the surplus budget. What are the four different concepts of budget deficit? Budget deficit, revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, primary deficit. So budget deficit, these all I have discussed in the earlier classes. What is this fiscal deficit? how budget or planned deficit happens, revenue deficit, what it is in which account we are considering that, and what is known as the primary deficit. Name the two types of revenue receipts, tax and non-tax. Yeah, we have seen it. Okay, so that's what about the basic economic concepts. A lot of things we have discussed till now. Now, plus one NCRT discussion, some portions left over are there. So we will discuss and proceed. Okay. Development policies and experiences. Development policies and experiences 1947 to 1990. Before 1947, it was under the colonial regime. From 1947, the pattern one was with the International Congress per se, or with the Indians, and in up to 1990s, a socialistic nature of the economy we have created within us, but we proved that to be a worse existence in 1990. So we have a broad liberalization, privatization, globalization, and today we are in a phase of more globalized country, more liberalized country, more integration with the world market. So all the policies are of nature of liberalism and the capitalism than the socialistic or the protective. So Indian economy on the eve of independence. This was the nature or the features of Indian economy at the time of independence. Low level of economic development under the colonial rule. So economic development was very low. Any sector you take, it was very low. The large population that was employed in the agricultural sector, but GDP value was very less. Overall, when the GDP of our country, when you are comparing it with the globe or other countries, it was very minimal level, sometimes negative too. Agricultural sector in a very derailed way here. Derailed in the sense, productivity was very poor, population load was too high, modernization was not seen at all, and the goods produced, means colonial time only we are explaining here on the eve of independence. So the goods produced by our agricultural sector, that was for matching the necessities of the colonial powers. So the colonial mother country, Britain, had a lot of interest. So whatever they required, we produced. Plantation crops were there, and agricultural in many level, it is in the nature of subsistence agriculture. That means the family that is producing for them, they never invested in increasing fertilization of our field, increasing the production. They never tried that. Then the cotton was one of the greatest production. Then industrial sector also in such a pathetic condition. Consumer, the goods produced here, or the production happens here in the nature of raw materials production. So the raw material production that's exported to the Britain. In the Britain, industrial activities were high and strong. There, the finished goods they exported to our country. So that finished goods they sold here. In order to maintain this market in that way, they have taken the steps like not investing in any production activities here. Of course, there were some cotton. One second. Done. So industrial sector also, that was in a very pathetic situation here, and capital industry was not at all existing, not at all benefited in any way, and cotton industries were there. That's also matching that's matching only the requirement of the colonial power, and traditional industries almost all gone, Handicraft industry got completely derailed because the market for handicraft industry is gone. The higher cost for handicrafts and the matching of handicrafts with the one produced with the machines, that matching was very difficult. So handicraft industry is also good. Foreign trade, yeah, foreign trade was very healthy in one say, and many production centers were connected with the rail network to the ports. Ports were developed, exports were there. Mainly the exported goods were raw materials like the yarn cotton raw materials and kerosene and many other supplies, indigo. So these all exported, and import of goods were there. These importing goods were more of clothes in the nature. So cotton clothes imported, salt imported, tea imported. So these all exported from here, processed there and brought it back. So export import activities were very higher, and always the export value was very higher than the import value. Then we may think like, oh, India got benefited from the foreign trade. No, but that money never came back to India because colonial administration decided what to do with that money. They decided to do what they decided to do. They decided to spend that on their administration expenses and war efforts. So this foreign trade benefit, that is one way, another looting of our country. Demographic condition. Till 1920s, Indian situation was like high birth rate and high death rate. After 1920s, death rate reduced drastically. Occupational structure. Majority of the population, 75% of the population at the time of independence was depending upon the agriculture, either directly or indirectly, because there was no industrial base, not enough service base, and subsistence farming was there. Family fully depended upon the agriculture because always they thought of food. Okay, what we need to have. Infrastructure. Infrastructure investment happened in the case of roads, in the case of port, in the case of railway network, in the case of defense, in the case of communication. But why these all infrastructure development happen? It is only for making it easy for the exploitation of our country and its resources. For development policies and experience, Indian economy on the eve of independence. Just now we have discussed this. Okay, agricultural sector, industrial sector, foreign trade, demographic condition. Fine. Other than the population demographic transition, mortality rate, infant mortality rate, life expectancy was very low. Occupational structure up to 75% worked on the agriculture. Infrastructure, fine. So that was the condition of Indian economy at the time of independence. But in 1947 we got our control back. So 1950 to 1990, whatever happened, we should take the credit of that. Either credit or discredit, we need to take that. Indian economy 1950 to 1990. 1950 to 1990. So Indian economy 1950 to 1990. The goal of 5-year plans, agriculture, industry and the trade policy, import substitution, these all were happened in 1950 to 1990. Trade policy, import substitution. So instead of importing, we tried to produce almost all goods within our country because importing is bad for the economy. Why? Because we need to pay the money. That money cannot be paid in rupees. For that you need dollar. For that dollar you need something to export. Only if you are exporting, you will have the revenue, that is dollar. You can keep that in your purse and you can give it whenever you are importing. Anyway, petroleum goods, that we cannot discard at all, and the production of that was minimal, or that was not at all there in our country. Yes, it was there, but when you compare with the demand of our country, something like you can say It's not at all there. So always the trade policy of our Indian economy from 1950 to 1990 means international foreign trade, something kind of import substitution. We always tried to do that. So importing of the consumable goods or consumer goods were strongly prohibited or highly tax imposed. Economic cloud always determine economic clouds always determine the strength of that country. Agriculture, yes, agriculture. It was primitive in condition in 1950s, and in 1960s we faced our worst famine situation. Food scarcity was there. Millions of people in India died out of hunger in 1960s. From that, we have learned one lesson that we should have the enough food crops to feed our people. For that, import is not the chance, import is not the option. Then what else? The chance is you need to produce more because you have such a huge country, such a huge workforce, and you need to channelize it properly so that more production can be happened. From the subsistence farming, from the subsistence farming to commercial agriculture, it should be moved. The goals of 5-year plan. 5-year plan, that was the strategy followed by our country in order to develop our economy. So every 5 year, government will set a lot of targets. Depends upon those targets, government will move each plans, policies, and fund will be allocated in that area. Okay, let's see the different content of that. Little bit lengthy per se. Let's see. It's an introduction again +1 NCERT. So 15th August 1947, India got freedom, and the leaders of the independent India had to decide, among other things, the type of economic system that is most suitable for our nation. A system which would promote the welfare of all rather than a few. So a welfare country. In DPSP itself, in the constitution, directive principles of state policy itself, they are making it clear a welfare government is required for us, a welfare state. We does not require an autocratic state or exploitative state. We need a welfare state. You need to really think that whether our today's government, today's state is a welfare one or not. So there are different types of economic systems, and among them, socialism appealed to Jawaharlal Nehru the most. So many might be thinking why we have gone behind the socialistic system of economy. 1937, itself made it clear that he is a socialist. He first is a socialist because he believed socialism is something bringing the mass towards a common achievement rather than capitalistic or individualistic centric. Jawaharlal Nehru, like many other socialistic leaders of that time, is also believed in socialism. So Nehru got satisfied with the positive sides of the socialism. That's why that kind of an economy is adopted. However, he was not in favor of the kind of socialism that is established in the Soviet Union, USSR. Earlier, today it is Russia. Earlier, different countries together, the confederations together, USSR were there in the Balkan state. Means not Balkan, East European to Central Asian countries. So Soviet Union, whatever socialism existed, okay, there where all the means of production, all the factories, farms in the country are owned by the government. There was no private property, and that kind of socialism not wanted by Jawaharlal Nehru. It is not possible in democracy like India for the government to change the ownership pattern of the land and other properties of its citizens. in the way that's happened in the USSR. So in today's China, so China is also, it's dictated by a party, dictated by the Communist Party there. That's not democracy. There is no democracy there. But when India, when you take here, it is the people's will. It is the people's choice. When you are respecting the people's rights and freedom, always they have the freedom to business. Always they have the freedom to choose their own economic setup. So, state-sponsored socialism that's were seen in Chinese USSR, that's not suitable for India. Nehru and many other leaders and thinkers of the newly independent India sought an alternative and extreme version of capitalism and socialism. So extreme capitalism that's seen in the Western democracies, socialism that is seen in the USSR, China and all, we does not require. So basically symbolizing with the socialistic outlook, they found the answer in the economic system which is combined the best of socialism and capitalism. So in this view, SSC GD class time, you can check in the schedule Jaga. Schedule it's given. Okay. So economy with the private sector being encouraged to the part of the plan effort. So industrial policy resolution of 1948. Sometimes this asked in the OMR exams. When was the first industrial policy resolution of independent India passed? It is 1948. DPSP, that is also reflected the welfare government. In 1950, Planning Commission was set up. So 1950 Planning Commission was set up. The chairperson, Prime Minister. Now there is no Planning Commission. Niti Aayog replaced that. So earlier we said no socialism. So this box is right out from NCERT. So this is from NCERT. So economic system, different economic systems are mentioned here. One, see, every society has to answer three questions. What goods and the services should be produced in the country? How should the goods and the services to be produced? Should producers use more human labor or more capital or machine? How should the goods and the services distribute? Okay. So three questions every society needs to answer. What to produce, and how to distribute it. So depends upon these three kinds of system existed, the capitalist system and the socialist system, or its mix that we see in India, the mixed economies. Capitalist system, socialist system and the mixed economies. All factors they differ. What to produce, how to distribute that. Fine. So in a capitalist society, the goods produced are distributed among people, not on the basis of what people need, but on the basis of purchasing power, the ability to buy goods and services. So in a capitalist society, it's like what the market demands, it is produced. And how it is distributed, if you have money you can buy it. If you have money to buy a car Lamborghini, you can buy it. If you have money to buy a cycle, you can buy that. Fine. So capitalist always related with the individualistic. So individuals, if you have the ability, you buy it, you survive it, otherwise you are doomed, you die, we don't mind. So that is, one has to have the money in the pocket to buy it. So low cost housing for the poor is much needed, but will not count as demand in the market sense, because the poor do not have the purchasing power to back the demand. So you should have the purchasing power, you should have enough money, then only the producers will be interested in producing that. Okay. Socialist society. Socialist society answers these three questions in a totally different way. Socialist society, the government decides what goods are to be produced. So who decides? The government. In the capitalist, the market decides what goods needs to be produced. So here government decides what needs to be produced in accordance with the needs of the society. Suppose the society needs cars to travel, you produce cars. Suppose the society needs food supplies, you produce food supplies. So it is assumed that the government knows what is good for the people of the country, and so the desires of the individual consumers are not given much importance. So individually you may have different requirements. You may say like, I need a Porsche car, I need a Porsche area, I need a greenfield stadium. But the government might be recognizing the need of the mass. The mass might be saying that we need three times meals we require. So depends upon the need of the mass, government will ask the producers to produce there. That is what is socialist. In the case of mixed economies, the government and the market together answer the requirement of the economy. That means private are there, public are there. So India, once upon a time, government companies were there, public sector enterprises. They looked to in different areas, and many areas were reserved only for them. But in the case of individual characteristics, individual can also do his own industrial activity. He can do productive activities. So there is no restriction on that, except licensing system was there in India, strict quota mentioning was there, and everything controlled by the government in one way or another. What is a plan? So 5-year plans you might have heard. We have adopted that from the Soviet Union, and till 2017 our plan document existed, because 12th 5-year plan from 2012 to 17. After that there is no 5-year plans. Now we have a 3-year plan, 7-year plan, vision plans and all under Niti Aayog. Planning commission is a gone story. Fine. Okay, next is agriculture. So a lot of uh, areas you have seen in NCRT. This is from NCRT. Rough idea you will get from economy from this basic NCRT. So in 1950 to 1990s, in agricultural sector, what happened? We know. At the time of independence, many samidari system was there. So landlords were there. Many areas were focused under these landlords. So taking these lands from them and distribute that among the people, that was a Herculean task. So land reforms, for that many times this right to property of the individuals needed to be exempted. That's why the first amendment 9th schedule inserted to the constitution. So as part of land reform, land ceiling also said. Land ceiling means per person, per family, this much acre plot only allowed by the government. Why this that is done? So that the Samidari system could be terminated and the land could be taken by the government and given to the landless people. Green revolution, in order to increase the production, in order to make our country self-reliance in the case of agricultural production, we came up with the idea of green revolution. High yield variety seeds are used, irrigation purpose used, and infrastructure in the agricultural sector is increased gradually. Mechanization of agriculture, pesticides and fertilizers, chemicals were used, and with that high yield variety always produced a lot, and within years itself India became a net exporter of food crops than the importer of the food crops. Market surplus created. Then subsidies. Yes, subsidies were part of this because the high cost of the pesticides and the fertilizers cannot be borne by the farmers. That's why government came up with a lot of subsidies. By that, price fixed for the pesticides and the fertilizers by the government. So when the price is fixed, that means depends upon the market. Even though the prices of the fertilizers may change, it won't affect the farmers. Why? Because for the farmers, 20 rupee urine is 20 rupee urea, 20 rupee urea is 20 rupee urea for every time. Even though the price increased from 20 to 30, it will still remain as 20 rupee as for the urea for the farmers. Fine. Since that raw materials cost is kept constant by the farmers, what is the advantage? The production could be stabilized and the prices of the commodities like the net product, agricultural crops or the fertilizer or the horticultural crops, that will be same. That will be same prices. So consumer, it's good. So always subsidies are something that is affecting the market controls. We know the market is something like a supply demand should decide the prices. But the government is coming with the subsidy, always that has an impact on the production and its prices. That's why whenever the international body WTO came up, always they were asking like subsidies could be stopped, subsidies could be stopped. Now industry and the trade. So a lot of industries came up there and here. Tata, Adani Group, Reliance Group, a lot of higher corporate groups born in India in different sectors. Public and private sector in Indian industrial development. Both worked hand in hand. Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956. This was the first industrial policy resolution. It dictated how we should behave with the economy. Fine. So it always tried to bring regional equality and egalitarian society. It taxed the rich people and given subsidies to the poor people. Okay, so that is one way to make egalitarian society. From the rich, tax it and give that to the poor. Small scale industry. So in 1955, Village and Small Scale Industries Committee formed. Under them, small scale industries promoted. Banks also have targets like so small scale industry this much loans should be given away this year. So like that they do that. Fine. Trade policy, import substitution. The industrial policy that India adopted was closely related to trade policy. First, 7 plans trade was characterized by that is commonly called as inward looking. Technically, this strategy is called import substitution. So, why import substitution is there? We wanted to protect our economy. We wanted to support the industrial production of our country. Because for our own needs, if our industry is not able to produce proper goods, that means our industry will be a failure. Effect of policies on industrial development. The achievement of India's industrial sector during the first 7 plans are impressive, but impressive in the sense always there will be high and low, and the slow improvement it possessed, but largely our economy was downgraded with the license raj system, and a lot of corruption existed in our country's system, and that adversely affected our economic setup. Okay, read this conclusion. What the conclusion says, land reforms resulted in abolition of hated zamindari system. Industrial sector, many economists became dissatisfied with the performance of many public sector enterprises. Yes, a socialistic setup, mixed economy in which a strong socialistic base our government wanted. But the inefficient, corrupt, lazy government servants always resulted in the reason for our country's downgraded growth. Excessive government regulation prevented growth of entrepreneurship in the name of self-reliance. In the name of self-reliance, Indian producers were protected against foreign competition. and this does not give them the incentive to improve the quality of the goods that produce, because always they are protected by the government. Indian policies were inward oriented, failed to develop a strong export sector. The need for reform of economic policy was widely felt in the context of changing global economic scenario, and the new economic policy was initiated in 1991 to make Indian economy more efficient. Fine. So that is what is happened in the 19 till the 1990s in our economy. Okay, understood?